My name is Average Joe, and I'm a proud geek with expertise in movies, superheroes, and animation.
My name is Beef Pork Ribs. I'm a fine repository of esoteric knowledge, which I suppose most people would qualify as geeky. Though I dabble in many fandoms, my main areas of expertise are anime, movies, and Belgian comics, with a strong recent insurgency of D&D.
Our mission is to bring nerd and geek culture to the masses
by sticking it all under the microscope.
Welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast.
Movies, comics, graphic novels, TV, cartoons, animation, nerds are geeks, entertainment culture. Hear it on the Bat Jar, Nerdy Power. Nerds and geeks, come gather around the scene. Come and join us in the Bat Jar. Come and tune into Average Joe and his team. Lots of room here in the Bat Jar. When the newest nerdy news drops, these podcast pals put it under the scope. DC, Marvel, Disney, Star Wars, cinematic, multiverse. It's mega Christmas, strangest franchise. Hear it on the Bat Jar, Nerdy Power.
Why, hello there, and welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast, where we put nerd and geek culture under the microscope. Haha! Is that the best Donald Duck voice you got?
Yeah, it actually is.
You gotta go more. No, you just sound like Gollum, frankly, and it's a little disturbing.
Well, I was trying to be understood when I was speaking, but I guess we'll just both be Mickey Mouse in that case.
Well, that's very exciting, and I apologize, everyone. I don't want to make you sit through an hour of my Mickey Mouse impression, which I don't think is the worst, but obviously I'm not a professional, so...
It's actually... Of all the accents you've done in the podcast, I think that's probably the better one.
Oh boy. That is saying something. But yeah, so a little unconventional. We usually don't do an episode on like a character per se, but someone wrote in, being my mom, asking us to cover the Mickey Mouse franchise. So let's just dive right on into this. No preamble needed. I think everyone knows who Mickey Mouse is. And I was trying to think of what my secret origin segment was in terms of Mickey Mouse. But, maybe Beeper, you have a better answer to this than I do.
I had not given it sufficient thought, apparently. I think Mickey Mouse. So the thing is, like, obviously I grew up knowing who Mickey Mouse was. Actually, I am going to go ahead and say Fantasia, I think, is the first time I watched something that Mickey Mouse was in. Because as we all know, I grew up French, and so I watched a lot of Disney movies, but they were mostly in French, and I don't remember if we ever watched one that specifically had Mickey Mouse in it. So I think Fantasia may have actually been the first Mickey Mouse franchise thing that I ever saw.
Yeah, looking into Mickey Mouse's history, he's never really been in any feature-length films that have been put out in theaters. He has been in a lot of theatrical shorts. He's been in a lot of direct-to-video movies. He's been in short films. He's been in TV animated series.
I thought the Three Musketeers had a...
That was a direct-to-video release.
Really? Oh.
Yeah. And like Mickey's Christmas Carol was shown in theaters, but it was only a half hour long, so it kind of still counts as a short film.
Interesting.
I guess Fantasia, that counts, but like he's only in one segment of that.
Well, no, he appears a few times to talk to the host.
Oh, that's right. So does that count then? Does that count as a feature film with Mickey Mouse in it?
I'm gonna go ahead and say probably. And then after that, yeah, I did watch the Three Musketeers. Despised it. As I did most books or most movies based on books that I liked when I was a kid. And then after that, I was pretty indifferent to Mickey Mouse until I started playing Kingdom Hearts Chain Memories. And even there, he's actually a lot less in that one than other iterations of the game. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know that much about Mickey Mouse, nor do I care that much about him. but
Yeah, I think I was probably aware of the Mickey Mouse branding before I ever
Mm.
watched anything with him in it because, as people would know, he is more or less the official mascot of Walt Disney as a company. So I probably would have I probably had Mickey Mouse pajamas. I probably saw Mickey Mouse, like the Mickey Mouse ears on like VHSs I would have had as a kid. Probably would have seen him like introducing stuff or whatever. But I
and
was,
and in the old Disney logo, you would see him from the Sorcerer's Apprentice just throw the words Walt Disney in the air, right?
yeah. So
Something that used to happen.
I think the first Mickey Mouse product that I actually remember watching was probably like Mickey's Magical Christmas, which was a direct-to-video movie that came out in 1998.
Oh wow.
He has a brief cameo in a Goofy movie, so I definitely would have watched a Goofy movie before that.
I don't remember him in the Goofy movie.
Oh yeah, it's like when they're singing the song about going on the open road. There's like a brief shot of Mickey and Donald like hitchhiking, and Mickey has like one line.
Oh, okay. Because I definitely remember there was the thing that was like definitely making fun of Mickey Mouse because it was like a rodent show somewhere on the road, and that was great.
Yeah. And then around the same time, they also did a show on Disney called House of Mouse. Have you heard of House of Mouse before?
I have.
You talk about epic crossovers, that the Disney cinematic universe bringing together. So for people who don't know, okay, I let beeper, like, what do you remember about House of Mouse?
I remember that it had. I actually don't remember anything beyond the premise being that there were different characters from Mickey Mouse. Oh, I just thought of something actually. Sorry, my secret origin story is blown out of the water. Mickey Mouse Racing for the Game Boy Color. That's what it was. That was my first real specific introduction to Mickey Mouse.
Interesting. Okay.
And later on, Mickey Mouse Raceway USA for the N64. Especially, I distinctly have this memory as a kid. We were playing that game, and there was a part in the track where if you fell off a jump, it would drop you on the track somewhere where you could not build up enough speed to make the jump, and it would keep putting you back there, so you would soft lock the game.
Oh. I don't think,
Yep.
yeah, I guess your connection to Mickey Mouse seems to be mostly through video games, because I don't think I've ever played a video game with Mickey Mouse in it.
Oh, really?
Not that I can recall. I've never played Kingdom Hearts, so
That's the main one, but I feel like there's a lot of like Disney kind of spin-off games that, where it is mostly like the main cast of Disney, so Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, Goofy, and the rest of them. I think Fido was a part of the Mickey Mouse game because you needed, like, he would dig for money.
do you
So
do you
to
mean
build-
Pluto?
Pluto, that's what I mean. Yeah, Pluto. Like, he would dig for money, and you needed money to upgrade your car, so you could either win a bunch of races or you could just dig around with him.
Hmm.
And I think I probably have a stronger connection to that game because it is like this was when we had a video game rental store. So I never owned this game, but I have beaten it inside a week after several other weeks of trying.
Okay, so going back to House of Mouse,
Yes,
the premise was that Mickey and his friends ran basically a nightclub where they would show cartoons. And so the patrons of this nightclub were characters from Disney movies. So you'd see Snow White and Hercules and the characters from The Lion King. Like, you'd see characters from Disney movies that you would have never guessed lived in the same universe. But this show sort of christened the idea that, nope, all these movies take place in the same universe and they're all going to come to this nightclub to watch old Mickey Mouse cartoons. And my little brain thought it was amazing just to see all these characters together. And it only went on for a few years, but it was neat for the time.
And then they had the other spin-off, the House of Villain, right?
Yeah, so that was like the Halloween special where basically, a bunch of the villains decide to take over the club for one night, and Mickey puts on his sorcerer apprentice outfit at the end to fight Jafar. It's quite entertaining. Okay, but anyway, let's go into Mickey Mouse's secret origin segment.
This place must be fully automatic. Nobody's here.
Ooh, who's nobody?
Well, you know, nobody.
I know just about everybody, but I don't know a nobody.
No, there's nobody here.
But we're here. Does that make us nobody?
No, we're somebody.
Oh, so somebody is here.
Yes.
Then where are they and why don't they help us?
We're the somebody. Him, you, me.
Well, then help me. See, your phone's dead.
No.
Yes, it is. Don't you
I
remember?
can't help you.
Then what are you doing here?
I'm trying to get some help.
Hate to break it to you, Mickey, but somebody told me that there's nobody here.
But you and I and... Oh, forget it.
Mickey Mouse indeed has a birthday. Do you want to take a guess at what Mickey Mouse's birthday is?
I'm going to go ahead and say Mickey Mouse, coincidentally, shares a birthday with Walt Disney.
That would be clever, but sadly, no.
Oh.
Mickey's birthday is November 18th, and he made his debut in 1928. That was when the first set of Mickey Mouse theatrical animated short films were released. The first one to actually play in theaters was called Steamboat Willie.
Yeah, the one that has been playing since the 50th anniversary of animation, and where he whistles.
Yeah, so if you've seen a Disney animated film in the last little while, the title card for Walt Disney Animation Studios shows, footage from Steamboat Willie, the first. It's credited as the first appearance of Mickey Mouse, but as I learned today, there were two different shorts that were made before that they just couldn't get a distributor for. So if you want to talk canonically, his first appearance was in a short film called Plain Crazy, but no one wanted to put that one in theaters. So I don't know. Semantics, either way. Basically, Mickey Mouse made his debut in 1928, no matter how you look at it. Whether you consider the one that was aired in theaters first or the one that played or was created first, it doesn't really make much of a difference to me. Does it make much of a difference to you?
Not really. And I mean, especially since we did just kind of make not a stink, but a distinction earlier with he was never in a feature-length movie. I think we should take the first canonic one.
Okay, so we'll say Plain Crazy then is his first appearance. That was the first short film that was made. The plot of it's fairly simple. He builds an airplane and then takes Minnie Mouse up there on a date, and she's not very impressed with him, so he turns the plane upside down and they both fall out of the plane, and it's pretty simple. I did learn though that the airplane that is in this short comes back in the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse series, and it makes several appearances, and you can tell it's from that because the tail of the plane is made out of turkey feathers, because in the short he literally pulls the whole tail off a turkey and puts it on the end of his plane.
Nice. I mean, but that's the great thing about old cartoons, the not just Mickey Mouse, but things like Felix the Cat as well. They were very original in what they did.
Now, so that's technically when Mickey Mouse first debuted, but the origin of how we got to Mickey Mouse actually starts before that with a character called Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. Have you heard of him before?
As I recall, I think so, because I'm pretty sure he's in the Who Framed Roger Rabbit movie. I could be wrong, but I think he is.
I don't think he is, because basically...
But the name is familiar to me.
Yeah, so basically, of course, people will know that Walt Disney was one of the creators of Mickey Mouse. What most people don't know is that there was a guy who worked alongside Walt Disney creating the character, and his name was Ub Iwerks. Ub Iwerks was an animator that was friends with Walt Disney, and they started working together in Los Angeles. They got a deal with Universal Pictures to make a series of animated short films, because back then there were no feature-length animated films. If you did animation, it was in shorts. And they created this character called Oswald the Lucky Rabbit for Universal. And if you look at Oswald's design, it looks very similar to Mickey Mouse, except he has longer ears and he wears blue pants instead of red pants. And the how this ties into the origin of Mickey Mouse is that Walt Disney wanted to do more shorts featuring the character, but because they had created the character as part of a contract with Universal Studios, Walt Disney and iWorks didn't own the character. The character technically was the property of Universal Studios. And so if they wanted to make more cartoons with this rabbit, they would have to do it on Universal's terms. And Universal offered them a contract, basically give them a 20% pay cut from what they had made the first round. And Walt Disney was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And so he walked.
Enough.
Yeah, so he walked away from the deal, and that was seemingly the end of Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. I think it wasn't until like 2006 that Universal gave the rights back to Disney in exchange for a sportscaster. There was some sportscaster that worked for ABC, and they basically swapped. So Disney got the rights to Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, and Universal got the rights to using this sportscaster. So it took a long time. That's why I doubt that he's in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, because it wasn't until 2006 that Disney was able to.
Okay, but I was aware of the name, so maybe when it happened, I heard about it.
Well, there's a video game called Epic Mickey, where Oswald is like a co-star.
Right, that. But I never played that game. I'm aware of it, but
yeah, so maybe that's where your memory is kind of jogging. And the whole incident with Oswald basically becoming a character that was no longer available to him and Oob meant that they had to, well, first of all, the lesson they learned was, okay, I'm never going to work for someone else again. If I'm going to create content, it's going to be my own stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's from after that fallout with Universal that Walt Disney went on to make like Walt Disney Studios. And it was from there that since they didn't have Oswald anymore, they basically created a new character who ultimately became Mickey Mouse. And again, if you look at a picture of Oswald the Lucky Rabbit and you put him up against Mickey Mouse, they look very similar visually. I'm surprised that Universal didn't try and like pull a copyright claim on them for, ripping off Oswald, but that's
especially when like at the time of rubber hose animation, they would look very similar, like even like more so because you would have like stretching and extensions of different limbs, so it's even harder to talk about the difference.
Right.
And also animation was still all in black and white, so who could tell the difference between the two of them, like having red pants and blue pants.
Yeah, and adding insult to injury, when the breakup with Universal happened, a lot of Disney's animators decided to stay at Universal. So when he and his partner decided to start Walt Disney Studios, they were literally only had a small portion of their workforce kind of working with them. So it felt like starting over for them.
But apparently it turned out pretty okay.
So does that surprise you at all to learn that Mickey Mouse is basically Walt Disney's second shot at trying to create an iconic character?
I mean, yes and no. It's one of those strange things because they are so similar, it's almost not a second shot. But I feel like what made him iconic wasn't necessarily his character design at the time. It was more the quality of animation. But then the fact that they stuck with him is kind of what makes him... Personally, that's what I think is what has made him like an epic character or something that has lasted, is the fact that they decided to make him more iconic, like almost to make him more iconic, to kind of focus on that character as the beginning of things. Because there was no need to do that, right? And I don't think that he necessarily... His popularity is almost like artificially inflated because he remained the mascot of Walt Disney, but Walt Disney became very big, if that makes any sense. Because as you said, he's in basically nothing other than side project. Like he's none in the feature-length, films, and he's like a mascot rather than an actual character.
Yeah, which is interesting because you think about you think of Disney as a brand, you think of the Mickey Mouse head with the ears, right? Like that's
Oh
just
yeah, for sure.
it's synonymous. And I think about like when I went to Walt Disney World as like a 12-year-old, even though I hadn't watched a lot of stuff with Mickey Mouse in it, there was just something you got so excited about meeting Mickey and Minnie Mouse. Even though I had seen very little content with them as characters, there was just something like this, I don't know, prestige had been built around the character through just the general Disney culture that made it seem like
Yeah.
a big deal.
But I guess that is the thing. Like it was made a bigger deal. Because I think even just as far as like he does have a simple character design, which does help for it to be iconic. But even just if you look at like series that have spun off of like Disney characters, Donald Duck has a lot more because there's like the entire DuckTale universe, which includes Launchpad McQuack and Darkwing Duck, and a whole slew of cartoons, a few movies where Donald Duck features very heavily, like the Three Amigos, or no, the Three Caballeros.
Three Caballeros, yeah.
And the remake of thereof, and you do have a fair amount of other movies that he's in, probably just as many shorts as Mickey Mouse himself, but Mickey Mouse was made to be the figurehead,
Yeah,
Not that Donald Duck is like, small potatoes or anything, but like the fact that Mickey Mouse overtakes him, I think, was more of a marketing solution, and one that worked, obviously, because Mickey Mouse is always presented as being the head of Walt Disney, but it's, I don't know, I don't think it's that. I don't know. Again, it's not as iconic, I don't think. He's not as iconic as a character. I think if you ask people, a lot of them would prefer Donald Duck or Goofy because they have a lot more character than Mickey Mouse does. Or anything that Mel Blanc created if we're going into old school animation, but that's maybe a discussion for another day.
Well, I think there's a good parallel to be made with characters like Superman, because when Superman first debuted in the comic books in the 1930s, he was kind of a social crusader, and he kind of like questioned the system, and he was a hero of the people. He was going around beating up husbands who were abusing their wives, kind of thing. And then slowly, as Superman rose in popularity and he became the kind of flagship character of DC, he sort of became this person representing authority, and he was kind of like, I'm Mr. Nice Guy. Mickey Mouse, very similarly, in his original shorts, he's much more mischievous, and he kind of he feels more like a cartoon character at that time, kind of like what am I going to do to get away with some wackiness here?
He kind of did the opposite of Bugs Bunny. Or like Bugs Bunny used to never be the one to start a fight. He used to always be a reactive character, but then started becoming more and more of kind of a jerk to people and just annoying for the sake of being annoying. Mickey Mouse started by being kind of a jerk and annoying and got gradually less and less belligerent.
Yeah, and then Donald Duck was introduced to be his comedic foil. So Mickey Mouse kind of very quickly over the course of a few years transformed into the straight man. And then Donald Duck is going like he's the one freaking out and having the large emotional reactions. And then Mickey is kind of playing the role of the straight man. And then once you got Goofy in there, it sort of turns into almost like a Three Stooges kind of environment.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's they took away a lot of his character, but and you do get that a lot. You want broad appeal. You don't want something that's too strongly in one direction or another. And Mickey Mouse definitely kind of started going into that direction. He's friendly, and that's his major character trait. He's friendly. Maybe maybe Mickey Mouse is the ultimate anime protagonist because he also believes in the power of friendship, and that solves all of his problems seemingly. But but also not, because I hadn't thought of this before you started talking about it, but like honestly, usually Donald is the one who solves the problem with violence. It's just that Mickey is there to calm him down afterwards and to like point him in the right direction.
Yeah, like I think it's very telling that there haven't been too many shows or movies where it's like Mickey Mouse kind of initiating an adventure of some kind. In fact, I don't know, I would almost draw a parallel to Mario of like, Super Mario Brothers. It's like they're just sort of like the protagonist, and they're the good-natured person who if I think of what is Mickey Mouse's character, it's like, well, he's kind, he's kind, he's nice, he seems to be able to want to stand up for what's right. And I guess on that's influenced by like the versions of him I've been introduced to through different like movies and stuff. I have some Mickey Mouse trivia here. First of all, people like to point out that Walt Disney himself was afraid of mice, and so people just sort of think it's funny that his famous character ended up being a mouse. It's been canonically confirmed that Mickey is short for Michael, so Mickey's full name is Michael Mouse. And apparently he was going to originally name him Mortimer Mouse until his wife said it was a dumb idea. She's like, that's a terrible name. And so she suggested Mickey, and so that's how they landed on Mickey Mouse.
I mean, I feel like, yeah, Mortimer, although at the time Mortimer was probably a more normal name, like, you know what I mean? Like, it hasn't stood the test of time, but it is something that was, I feel like it's an old-timey name, but it would have been more popular there, like kind of like Donald or Bugs or Felix. They're short, easy names.
Yeah.
But also Mortimer is 3 syllables as opposed to 2, which also, I guess,
they did eventually create a Mortimer Mouse character who was like Minnie's like ex-boyfriend. So Mortimer Mouse does come into play later on in the canon of Disney stuff. But interestingly, about Mickey's design, of course, he was originally drawn with just black dots for his eyes. And then they kind of went towards what were called pie eyes, where like his eyes looked like pies that had a slice cut out of them. And then they moved his eyes to looking more like human eyes. So like they were white with a black pupil inside them. I found out that they started adding gloves to his hands because they wanted to provide contrast for when his hands were like up against his body, because in black and white cartoons, if your character's mostly black, including his hands, there were often times where like the hands would be like, or the arms would be like over his legs or over his body, and you wouldn't be able to, his hand would just sort of blend into his body. So by giving him,
sense. I feel like that was a common animation trick at the time, though.
Yeah,
so like think of a few other like older animation characters who also wear gloves. Just never thought of why.
Well, apparently it was like a thing in blackface to like have to wear white gloves, and so there's some people that draw comparisons to the fact that there's these cartoon characters that have all black limbs and with the white gloves. I mean, I think that's a bit of a stretch, but there was that real world thing. But you're right, in a lot of animation thing, it was the thing that have gloves in their hands. But in Mickey's case, it was because they wanted to basically give him more contrast, and that's also why they gave him shoes, because originally he didn't have shoes. He just had he had black hands and black feet, like a real, or whatever, like a mouse. And so they gave him shoes and then gloves, and that kind of helped create contrast. And I think it does make his look feel more distinct, even though it was common at the time. Like the fact that he's still around. I don't know why the dude can't put a shirt on. Like, why are you just wearing a pair of shorts, bro?
Well, I mean, why does Donald Duck never wear pants? It's the same kind of thing. When you've got simplistic designs, it you don't need to be wearing. And I think it's also like the less human looking they are, the more they get away with it. Because Goofy of the 3 is the most human looking. Because I sometimes forget he's supposed to technically be a dog, right?
Yeah, he's supposed to be. We don't question why he can talk and Pluto can't, but
yeah.
I saw cute little cartoon ones that suggested that Mickey Mouse met Winnie the Pooh without a shirt on, and he basically like tore his outfit in half and gave the top to Winnie the Pooh, and that's why he only has pants.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, they all share one universe, right? Because as we've discovered, so
Yeah.
it could totally have happened.
And
Although I feel like wearing like a sweater with those kind of like suspenders and like golf short suspenders would seem a little strange.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure the book version of Winnie the Pooh doesn't wear the red shirt. I think that's something that Disney injected into the lore with the movie they
Yeah,
did. So.
that's true. I don't think any of them wore clothing, actually. Yeah.
Well, I think Pooh's the only one of them that wears, of those characters, that wears clothes, right?
Oh yeah, I get, but I mean, but it was almost part of his body. Like it
That's-
doesn't cover any of his limbs. It just covers his midsection.
Yeah, maybe we shouldn't question this too much, but I was surprised to learn that there was a number of years where they actually like got rid of Mickey Mouse's tail. Like he just didn't have a tail for the longest time.
That doesn't surprise me.
I mean,
I
maybe
thought
they thought
that was still the case. Actually, I thought Mickey Mouse didn't have a tail.
And I watched some of the most recent Mickey Mouse shorts that are available on Disney Plus, and he does have a tail there. I guess they worked around the Ozaru problem, so they didn't have to worry about him not having a tail anymore.
I guess so. Somebody, Piccolo must have destroyed the moon again.
So Mickey Mouse, of course, he has a very iconic voice. He has this high-pitched, falsetto-y voice that, some actors can maintain for more than 10 seconds than I did just there. But it turns out in the entire history of Mickey Mouse, if you think about it, he debuted in 1928. We're now in 2022. So it's been almost 100 years this character's been around. And there's only been 5 official voices of Mickey Mouse in that time. I saw like a video today that kind of showed how there have been random instances where he has been voiced by other people throughout the last 90 so years, but officially there's only been 4 or 5 people to voice Mickey Mouse, the first being Walt Disney himself. He actually was like the voice of Mickey Mouse for the first like 20 or so years that Mickey Mouse was a thing. And the rumor is that he had to stop doing it because his smoking problem made it so that it was hard for him to keep his voice up. Because like a lot of people from that time period, Walt Disney was known to be a big smoker. So it's kind of hard to, keep talking like this when you smoke so much.
Yeah, you'd end up having like a weird hybrid between Mickey Mouse and Naruto.
So after Walt Disney kind of stepped away from the role, there was a guy who was actually like an engineer at Disney that took over the role, and he maintained the Mickey Mouse voice ship all the way from 1947 all the way until 1983 when he retired.
Wow.
Now
38 years of being a mouse. That's pretty impressive.
Now we say that, but it's in hindsight, it's actually not that impressive because the last animated short featuring Mickey Mouse came out in 1953. And then he wasn't in an animated short again until the Christmas Carol in 1983. So this second Mickey Mouse voice probably only had about 5 years of work. And then basically from 1953 onwards, Walt Disney was so focused on making Walt Disneyland a thing that he wasn't kind of focusing on the animation as much.
And I suppose that also kind of, at the time, they didn't have to worry about like licensing him for video games and other products yet. So
they did do the Mickey Mouse Club, which has had like 3 different iterations, one in the 50s, one in the 70s, and one in the 90s. And so there were like animated segments of that where this second Mickey Mouse voice would have been involved. But it was kind of like an era where Mickey Mouse didn't show up in too many things. But starting in 1983, Wayne Alwyn was the voice of Mickey Mouse, and he continued in the role until 2009 when he passed away. So most of the stuff that I've seen with Mickey Mouse in it has this guy as the voice. And of course, that I'm biased because that was the first one I ever heard. Mickey's Christmas Carol was literally like the first thing he ever did as Mickey Mouse. And then he voiced Mickey in so many different things. And then the fun piece of trivia there is that Russi Taylor, who was the voice of Minnie Mouse at the time, was his wife. They got married in like the 90s. And so, for like up until he died, they were playing romantically against each other. And that's just so cute. She's now passed away.
I guess the first one, the second one would have also been the voice of Mickey Mouse in Fantasia then, right?
Well, Fantasia was 1940. So that would have been Walt Disney still.
Okay. Oh. So I guess the first time I heard Mickey Mouse, it was Walt Disney.
Oh, boy.
All
And
the
then-
fun facts we're hearing.
And then Wayne Alwyn died in 2009. So a guy named Brett Irwin is the current voice of Mickey Mouse. He's been playing the role basically since then. But then, plot twist, in 2013, Disney started making some animated shorts in the spirit of the original Disney shorts. And for this, they chose a different actor whose name is Chris Diamantopoulos, who's from Canada. And they chose him to voice Mickey in these shorts because they felt his voice as Mickey sounded more like the one that Walt Disney would have done originally. And therefore, it was more in line with those classic shorts than the Brett Irwin version, which is more in line with like the Mickey Mouse that more modern audiences would be aware of.
Oh, I see. That's interesting.
It is interesting because Disney generally with these legacy characters, like there's one official voice at a time and no one else is allowed to do it. So it surprises me that they're kind of allowing for these two versions of Mickey Mouse to exist concurrently like this.
Yeah, and well, I mean, and that's a fairly common thing for like animation, for video games too, and for like, because I know like after Mel Blanc passed away, Warner Brothers did a similar thing with the Looney Tunes, is they'd have very specific actors voicing them, and nobody else did it for a while to keep continuity, even though those voices are so iconic, everybody does an imitation of them, but I guess it's but I understand the logistics behind making it somebody who's got like a better or a more accurate to Disney, but at the same time it's a little odd to be kind of like backpedaling the canon, because even if they're done in the spirit of the same kind of original shorts as we are discussing today, the character and the brand of Mickey has kind of gone on and moved into bigger things, so it seems kind of odd to go backwards with it. I don't know.
Well, in terms of like content starring Mickey Mouse, the age for like the target age audience has just sort of gotten younger and younger as time went on. So like when we were kids, there were direct-to-video movies, there were things that like were targeted, like I would say like maybe 8 to 12-year-olds at the most. But then in 2006 they started the show called Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, which was basically like Dora the Explorer. It was like that kind of educational entertainment, the kind where like they talk to the screen and they wait for the kids to respond and then they move on.
Good old edutainment.
Yeah. And
They
so that
only
show
ever
went
did
on
probably
that
in
went
the
on for
90s.
10 years. And just now in 2021 there's like a new one called Mickey Mouse Funhouse, which is like the same idea. So the target audience for like mainstream Mickey Mouse stuff has just sort of skewed younger and younger. And this other series of animated shorts, it's done in like a flash animation, kind of more simple style. And it is jarring. Like they are kind of weird. And I kind of like it kind of weird. Like it's very avant-garde for Disney content, I would say. I don't like the way Goofy looks in them. He looks like he looks like he's high on drugs or something. He's got like these yellow eyes and his face is a little scruffy.
Goofy is probably the most I don't know, the Goofy movie made him associated with the disco era, so it's not complete. It might not be completely
Now
inaccurate.
wait a minute, I resemble that remark. That's more like a Foghorn Leghorn, but anyway.
No, Foghorn is deep south.
Yeah, you're right.
I say.
Gosh, I'm so sorry for offending Foghorn Leghorn.
I know he's one of the least important character, but we had a VHS of compilation of Merry Melodies featuring him, so I've seen a lot of him as a kid.
I just remembered, technically Mickey Mouse does appear in Who Framed Roger Rabbit in a very famous moment where he and Bugs Bunny are on screen at the same time. That'll probably never happen again, but again, it's like a cameo. He doesn't really have much of a role in the film.
Yeah.
But it was still cool to see, dang it, when I finally saw the movie years later. I wasn't alive, and neither were you when that movie came out.
Well, if you weren't, then by default I wasn't. I think we've specifically talked about that.
Now, I mentioned the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, which was like I don't know much about it. I understand like Britney Spears and Justin Timberlake and Ryan Gosling and Christina Aguilera like appeared on this show as Musketeers. That was like the name of the kids on the show. But I don't know what it was about, nor do I know what the 70s version or even the 50s version of the show was like. Have you ever heard of this, the Mickey Mouse Club?
I mean, it was like a Disney Channel thing, right?
Well, I mean, before the Disney Channel was a thing.
Yeah, but it was kind of a prototype for the Disney Channel, right? Because they had like young stars, like young talented people who did go on to become bigger. I remember something about it. Like I don't remember which actor, but some actor talking about it and how it was like basically talking about it as it was like a prototype of what the Disney Channel would eventually become, and like not just a channel where they run things made by Disney, but like specifically the idea of like taking young talent and growing them in shows or in, you know, the kind of featuring them in the spotlight and then hoping for them to stay loyal to the brand later on.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Now, do you prefer Mickey Mouse when he has like the black eyes, or do you like it when he has pupils?
I'm a big fan. So I'm more of a fan of him when he has black eyes because that is a Mickey Mouse that has more personality usually. Like in that era, Mickey Mouse was more of a character because it includes some of the older, most of the older things. So I think I prefer that Mickey Mouse to the kind of bland with pupil Mickey Mouse of today.
Well, okay, you mentioned blandness. Do we say he has a flat character arc?
I think so. Like, because even like we talked about, you know, Kingdom Heart. Like even in Kingdom Heart, he's just like the king who's kind of powerful and people liked him, and like he is like he doesn't really add much to the story or to what's going on. And I think that, yeah, generally speaking, I think he has a pretty flat character arc. He's, you know, he devolved a little bit in the 40s or between the late 20s and the 40s, and has kind of stabilized at the place. Because even like,
I don't think that's a bad thing.
I think that because he hasn't had like a specific dedicated show, because even if you look at like the Clubhouse, like he was more of a host than a character in it, and so he didn't really like get to change. So like, because again, going back to like DuckTales, like there's been 2 iterations of the show and they're pretty different, and you see kind of an evolution of the character changing, which you don't really have with Mickey Mouse. You know, he's always been the same character in pretty much every movie he's in, like short or like directed VHS movie or direct to video movie he's in. He plays a very similar character,
which I think kind of has to be the case because he's so iconic, and he is perceived as like an ambassador of the entire Walt Disney Company now, that it'd be risky to like do too wild with him. Which again, like having a flat character arc, meaning that like when he is in a story of fiction, like the world reacts to him instead of, that's how it works, right? Like they're not the one reacting to the world. No, how does that go?
The other way around.
Yeah, the world is, they're reacting to the world is not reacting to them.
Yeah, because they don't have agency.
Right.
Because their character doesn't change.
And honestly, for a character like Mickey Mouse, or at least how we're presented him, where he is kind of like just a nice guy and fights for his friends, and he is like an anime protagonist in that sense, like I'm okay with that. Mickey Mouse, I mean, I kind of like the newer shorts where it's kind of wacky and kind of like odd. Mickey Mouse kind of has more personality there, and he's more like gets frustrated, and I appreciate that, but I also appreciate just, I'm the host of the show, I'm the good guy, Mickey Mouse as well. Like I will always prefer.
I think beyond the iconic, it's also the choice to make him the mascot, but also the face of the company kind of required that as well. You know, you can't, like Donald Duck could not do that because he just has so many, deep character flaws. And so like you needed something, especially when you are a brand as large as Disney has become, you need to be very careful about what you put forward. And Mickey Mouse is like you said, it is bland, but it works. He's just a nice guy, and people like him.
Speaking of people liking him, I learned some things today that I was shocked to discover about the popularity of Mickey Mouse. First of all, Walt Disney was given an honorary Oscar just for creating Mickey Mouse. Like, he got an Academy Award just because he created Mickey Mouse.
I feel like there's a caveat to that it's also because he's Walt Disney. Like,
it was pretty early on in his career. Like,
really?
When
was it?
I didn't get the specific year, but I get this. It seemed like it wasn't too long. I think you're right. There is a bit of like Disney's animation accomplishments attached to that, but still, like, in 1935, the League of Nations gave Walt Disney like this certificate or something for Mickey Mouse, saying that he had become a global symbol of goodwill. I find that shocking. I'm like, really? Like, Mickey Mouse cartoons and like his brand was enough for the League of Nations to be like, you are a symbol of goodwill and we're going to acknowledge you.
I mean, wait, League of Nations. So this is pre-World War II.
Correct.
So, they're... I mean, honestly, I can see that just because, again, not Mickey Mouse itself, but because the work of Walt Disney were so, like, influential. Because, like, if even it just, like, if you look at, like, the manga industry, like,
Osamu Tezuka? Osamu Tezuka?
Yeah, Osamu Tezuka was inspired by Walt Disney, and it's a large reason of why anime characters have big eyes is because Walt Disney's first few movies had main characters that had big eyes, mostly animals. But, like, the influence that he had on art and specifically on animation was huge and was very rapid.
But Mickey Mouse is the one who got these acknowledgments, not Walt Disney.
No, I understand that, but that's why I'm like, again, Mickey Mouse is the face of Walt Disney and has been for a while.
Right.
And if they'd already given him the Academy Award for creating this character, then it stands to reason that they'd keep plugging in that character. And I don't know, maybe I'm being a little... Maybe Walt Disney wanted that. Like, look, we're talking about pretty aggressive capitalism that still exists in the U.S. at that time, and maybe that was a business decision, and in hindsight, one that was really good because it cemented a brand.
Mickey Mouse was the first cartoon character to get a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Yeah, also a sham. Why Mickey Mouse? Again, give it to Walt Disney, but I think at that point that's a moot point because he's become such a big thing. And just these discussions about like Mickey Mouse as a symbol once again is really making me think about Billy Bat. Great manga, people should read it. But just the idea that, like, both in that and in reality, it became more about the character than the accomplishments.
Yeah, he was the first cartoon character to be the lead float in the Macy's, what was then called the Santa Claus Parade.
I mean, that makes sense.
And then apparently, I saw somewhere today, 40% of Disney revenue from merchandise comes from like Mickey Mouse merchandise alone.
That to me is crazy, though. Like I understand it. Again, he's the face, and everybody who goes to Disneyland gets at least one Mickey Mouse themed thing. But at the same time, like, I mean, everybody. I probably wouldn't if I went to Disneyland, but which I may have to at some point. but I may be forced into doing it. But like, I don't know. It's still. I'm not sure how much, but in these statistics, how much does like Disneyland and Disney World count as the like in the percentage of the merchandising? Probably a fairly substantial percentage, right?
Yeah, I didn't get the source. I just, that statistic kind of stood out to me. I'm like, oh yeah. And you know what? Like, I remember this documentary I saw about Superman. Again, I'm bringing up Superman again, but there was a documentary I saw in 2006 where this one historian literally said there are two characters that you can trace their history to their marketing, and he said that's Mickey Mouse and Superman. So we cannot underplay the fact that Mickey Mouse, has been a merchandising machine, a marketing giant, and people have been criticizing the Walt Disney Company for years now for their business practices, and Mickey Mouse, frankly, he kind of becomes a shield for them. It's like, look at our altruistic love, and oh, hi everyone, we're the greatest in the world.
And that's why I wouldn't be surprised if it was a marketing choice to deflect some of those awards to Mickey Mouse rather than Walt Disney himself. Because I do think that Walt Disney, maybe not as a person, but as a symbol of the arts, may have deserved those things, but but it's hard. But it does also mean that like Mickey Mouse has been probably one of the most targeted characters for political satire and caricature.
And this leads to what I wanted to end our conversation on, and that's how Mickey Mouse has impacted copyright law. Because before Walt Disney and Mickey Mouse, the general rule of thumb was that copyright on a fictional, like on intellectual property in the United States, was set up so that the original owner maintained rights to the thing for 28 years after their passing. And then once those 28 years passed by, the intellectual property entered the public domain. And there was an option to add a 28-year renewal onto that. So that meant that up to, 50, 61, 62 years after a person's passing, then a property would enter the public domain. But Disney basically have several times now paid for lobbyists in the US government to make changes to the copyright law. Are you familiar at all with this kind of saga that has been going on in the United States?
No, but it sounds fascinating.
So the first time that they really intervened in copyright law was in 1976, where they basically sent some lobbyists to Washington, D.C., and they helped influence a major change to the copyright law that basically said that the copyright should remain for the lifetime of the character, or the lifetime of the original creator, and then add 50 years onto that. So instead, like if you and I were to create a character today by the pre-1976 law, from the very moment we created it, in 62 years from now, that thing would become a public domain entity. But under this First Amendment, or this change made in 1976, we would maintain the copyright on the characters until we die, and then for 50 years after that. So you think about it, 62 years from now, under the old rules, we would be in our 80s, but we would still be alive when the character entered the public domain, hopefully. But under the 1976 rules, the copyright would have continued on for 50 years after we died, which in theory, if we lived at least into our 80s, would be 150 or so, or 100, a long time from now.
It means that you could have a son who could be Average Joe after you die on a podcast, and nobody else could be that character.
That's right. That's right. And of course, you guys are probably thinking, why did Disney intervene when they did? It's because that is around the time that the copyright on Mickey Mouse would have worn out. So they were petitioning for these changes so that they could maintain the copyright on Mickey Mouse longer. And they were successful. And then that wasn't good enough for them, I guess, because, you think about it, Walt Disney died in the 1960s. So 50 years past that meant that, the copyright would have worn out in like 2017 or something. So in 1998, they intervened again, lobbied the U.S. government, and another change was made to the U.S. copyright law, saying that the copyright would either be eligible for 70 years after the author's death or 95 years from creation, whatever came first. And a lot of people have kind of referred to this as the Mickey Mouse Protection Act. Obviously, it wasn't called that officially, but informally, people call it the Mickey Mouse Protection Act because it basically means that it'll be a long time before anyone in the public domain can use Mickey Mouse as a character. And then apparently they've done a lot of work also to trademark specific elements of Mickey Mouse, like his name. So even if Mickey Mouse were to become a public domain character like Tarzan, they would still have to figure out ways to use the character without using any of the specific Disney aspects of the character.
Wow, I mean, again, seems like a lot of effort for a character that does barely anything, but at the same time, I mean, yeah, if Mickey Mouse was in the public domain and it's 40% of their merchandising options, that is definitely worth spending a few, probably $1 billion lobbying for.
Yeah, and then, you think about it, there is certainly a risk there. If Mickey Mouse was in the public domain and all these different people were using him for whatever reason, that would tarnish the brand of Disney because they rely so heavily on Mickey Mouse's image for, especially now with their image of, again, like trying to, we love everyone and pay no attention to all this shady business stuff we're doing behind this curtain over here. Ha
But I think, and it is a weird thing because I think we've all heard of somebody like refer to Mickey Mouse as like an evil entity because of those shady business practices. So it hasn't entirely worked, but I do agree that generally speaking, in the public consciousness, Mickey Mouse is still a beloved character.
Yeah, and so who knows if the copyright on Mickey Mouse will ever, maybe they'll intervene again and make a case for copyrights to extend longer. I mean, they're not the only ones benefiting from this. Now Marvel and DC basically have to keep access to their characters for a long time.
Oh yeah, because everything that was copyrighted to Stan Lee remains part of their arsenal for a long time.
Yeah. And
but they're also owned by Disney now, so ultimately it is still Disney profiting.
Yeah. And there's levels of irony in all this because, first of all, like as we talked about in the beginning, Mickey Mouse's entire creation as a character stemmed from the fact that Walt Disney lost access to his character Oswald. And so his whole mantra going forward had became, I'm only going to work on things that I can take ownership of. And to his credit, yeah, he reaped many benefits during his lifetime for the creation of Mickey Mouse. And then now, of course, the irony becomes Disney has made all these movies based on characters in the public domain. And if the same copyright laws that exist now existed when they were starting out, like they couldn't have made Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And so many of their movies
really?
Well, that's public domain. They would have had to pay money for the story that they didn't have to.
Well, no, only if the copyright had remained. Snow White was created in like the 16th century.
All right, fine. Snow White's a bad example. Point is,
I do understand. Tarzan, I think, though, probably still would have been under those laws.
Yeah, or the
Tarzan
Jungle Book at the very least
would have been still available. And yeah, the Jungle Book. Yeah, you're right. And
there's an irony to this, right? That
yeah, for sure.
You're trying so hard to protect what is yours, when in fact so much of what Disney has made money off of is not there. Like their source material is characters from the public domain. So what are they doing to the world now by basically withholding so much content from people? Now there's stories that can't be told because there is less available in the public domain.
Yeah, well, I mean, but Disney has done that for other things as well. I mean, it's the same. The way that they treated the extended universe for Star Wars, right? They just deleted it all so that they could fully profit from it, right? Like that was one of the reasons people got upset when Disney declared that the extended universe was no longer canon, was because it clearly was on almost probably every level a business decision so that they could control the market rather than other people be allowed to tell stories.
Again, we've talked about it. It's like Mickey Mouse himself isn't that super interesting a character. So if he was in the public domain, I don't know, maybe someone could do a really interesting story about Mickey Mouse as a character. Who knows? We might not live to see that day. Again, they might just keep extending the copyright laws to make it so that it's harder for other people to use the character. But all that to say, like during his lifetime, Walt Disney said many times that we can never. People say he said this all the time. He's like, we can never forget that it was all started with a mouse. So like the entirety of Walt Disney's empire all started more or less when they got Steamboat Willie in theaters and Mickey Mouse got them that foot in the door, that first bit of success, and everything that is Disney today kind of comes back to Mickey Mouse.
And for better or for worse, it'll probably keep on going.
And even though I'm more partial to Goofy, or at least the version of Goofy that's in the Goof Troop and Goofy movie, I have no problem with Mickey Mouse as a character.
Yeah, I don't think I have a problem with Mickey Mouse, but is he really annoying?
I have a little niece who loves Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse and that whole world of characters. So that's what I think about too. It's like, again, Mickey Mouse's target audience now is little kids. Like he's not meant to be entertaining to us.
That's true. And I mean, look, I grew up with Looney Tunes rather than Mickey Mouse, so they will, to me, he and none of his characters will ever live up to that. So I'm very indifferent to the entirety of the, Mickey Mouse extended universe, or Mickey Mouse and Pals. Is that like officially? Because I guess the extended universe would be all Disney movies. So is it Mickey Mouse and Pals or Mickey Mouse and Friends?
I don't know if they have a name for it, but certainly Mickey Mouse's like core group of like Donald and Daisy and Minnie and Goofy and Pluto, like they're usually all in the same space. But there you have it. That's been our spotlight on Mickey Mouse as a character. Very interesting stuff. Maybe we'll have to do a deep dive on some other characters. And if you are upset we didn't talk enough about his friends, maybe we'll have to have another conversation about all of Mickey's supporting cast.
Or other characters. I think this was kind of entertaining. And I feel like comic book characters, it might actually fit our whole identity as a podcast a bit more, but still. I am strongly fighting the urge to ask you to put Billy Bat in the Bat Jar.
I mean, Bat's in the title, and this is the Bat Jar, so you are a co-host, so you can just tell me to do something.
Beyond just, I will plug it again and recommend people read it, because it is a very, it's very weird, but there are some parts of it that are very pointedly aimed at Disney and kind of the idea that they have created Mickey Mouse to be this icon for them, which, the equivalent in Billy Bat is actually a mythic creature that may or may not be the devil or God. It's weird, like I said, but it's worth a read.
Yeah, so if you want us to talk about Billy Bat or other fictional characters, let us know, because, we don't have any mail this week, so
just go and make Average Joe read all of Billy Bat for a podcast episode.
If you want to reach the show, you can send us an email at
batjarpodcast@gmail.com.
Or you can tweet us at
The Bat Cookie Jar.
You can find the Bat Jar Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, including YouTube, because we got a channel. Share our posts on Facebook, write reviews, give our shows a rating. This will help all people join us inside the Bat Jar, and we appreciate it dearly.
And normally we would go inside the Bat Jar to pull our topic for next week, but the final episode for the Book of Boba Fett is airing this Wednesday. Oh. So it's time to...
Okay.
I have very mixed opinions on this show, and I'll be curious to hear yours when we talk about it next week.
I still have only watched the first episode up until now, so...
Well, you've got some work to catch up on.
I guess I'll do that. I'll do that on Tuesday. because I'm not working on Tuesday.
So come back to the Bachelor podcast next week when we talk about the Book of Boba Fett. And until that time, I'm Average Joe. Catch you on the flip side.